Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for November 16th, 2020, recorded around 2:16 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, we have one of the most powerful hurricanes in November history right now, set to be making landfall in Central America sometime later this evening. Hurricane Iota has now strengthened into a major Category 5 hurricane as it approaches Central America and Nicaragua. And over the next several days, this is going to be moving over the very mountainous terrains there of Nicaragua and over portions of Honduras as well before moving into El Salvador. And this will be causing major flooding concerns, extreme deadly wind here. We could be talking wind, on the order of 160 to 165 mile per hour sustained wind with gusts reaching closer to 200 miles per hour. So we are quickly talking about one of the strongest storms in November history in this part of the Atlantic for this time of the year. Is very remarkable. If we take a closer zoomed in satellite shot here on our storm, we can very clearly see that the storm has a well defined banding central dense overcast. You can see a very nice eye feature here that is apparent on the visible satellite imagery. Now, during the day today, we have had some slight discontinuity with the overall symmetry of the storm. What you can actually see is that the storm is actually a little bit more on the west. This is kind of a westernly weighted system right now. And towards the east, you don't have a well defined kind of symmetry on this side here with the central dense overcast. What this has kind of gone towards is a storm that is dealing with some easterly wind. Again, there's a little bit, just a slight 5 knot component of westerly wind here, or of easterly wind rather, that's blowing from east towards the west. And this is forcing some of those thunderstorms off towards the west. So this has kind of paused significant intensification of Iota. However, it is still a very deadly Category 5 hurricane. And again, this is the one of the strongest storms, and this is going to pack quite a very big punch. This is an extremely dire situation for portions of Central America and obviously Nicaragua, the Nicaragua coastline here, and even in towards Honduras. So you can see these rain bands extending all the way out to the coast of Honduras here. Tropical storm force winds extend out fairly far, and if we take a look here at the recon plane that was in there, you can see hurricane force winds extend almost all the way up to the border of Nicaragua and Honduras. Strong tropical storm force winds extend well north of there, and this will be all kind of rotating in with time on this northern end. And again, what you're going to see is on this northern end, you're going to have a lot of storm surge being piled up. That storm surge could be over 20 feet in spots. Again, that storm surge, these rain bands, going to dump a lot of rainfall. Flooding is going to be a fairly significant concern. Now you can see the pressure here of 920 millibars. And remember last night, the storm, or yesterday when we talked, the storm was only in the lower 970s to 980s. Last night we had about a 14 millibar drop in about a 50-minute period, which is just remarkable. And we've seen kind of a similar situation happen today where the pressure has continued to tank. And it is now down in the 920s, and we could actually be seeing pressures continue to fall just slightly to right around about 918, 919 millibars. Now you can see the strong tropical or the strong hurricane force winds are obviously confined right around the core. The radius of maximum winds is not very big. It's not a very large radius of maximum wind here. And what that means is just literally the radius of the maximum wind found within the hurricane. But the hurricane force winds do extend out fairly far from the center in all quadrants. Again, mostly towards the west here and also towards the northwest is where you're going to see the larger tropical storm and hurricane force wind field. But you can even see far on the eastern side of the storm too, very dense wind field that's out across here producing strong hurricane force winds in that general vicinity. Now you can see here from the official Hurricane Center forecast Sustained winds right now of about 160 miles per hour, moving generally towards the west at 9. Again, expected to make landfall sometime later this afternoon or evening. It is approaching the coastline now. Extremely dangerous winds, storm surge, rainfall, etc., will be occurring even well far inland across portions of Nicaragua and Honduras, remaining a hurricane through tomorrow morning before weakening and then becoming a tropical depression by Wednesday over El Salvador. The remnant vorticity, the remnant energy will move then into the eastern Pacific basin, where we would have to watch for additional, kind of energy to build up here and maybe get a tropical cyclone to form with the partial DNA of Hurricane Iota. Now, we're not done after Iota, however. We do have another area of investigation by the Hurricane Center. This has not been designated as an invest yet, but it will probably be shortly. This is a tropical disturbance that has a 40% chance of developing over the next 5 days. Not going to be of great concern for anywhere that is, anywhere towards the north of Jamaica. This should not be a big problem for Central America, especially for Belize. But South Central America could see these impacts from another tropical system. Now, if we actually look here at the GFS forecast, this is the 500 millibar flow in the atmosphere. And we're going to try to kind of pick out a couple of things here regarding what might be, what would eventually be Kappa if this indeed got a name. First of all, you can see the main steering flow for Iota right now, this ridge over portions of the Bahamas, this southwestern Atlantic ridge, causing a predominantly western flow. And we also have this ridge back over Texas and Mexico right now. Remember, this is a very big, stout ridge over here, but the middle is getting broken and eroded away because of this trough towards the north. So you actually will see it kind of split there in the middle, and you can kind of see that split occur. Now, the storm has already moved inland at this time. And again, that's because we have the predominant ridge over here producing westerly flow, a predominant ridge over here causing southwesterly flow, and behind it, you have a cold front digging it across. So you have very strong northwesterly wind that is affecting southward with time. And because this front is also moving towards the southeast, it's kind of going along with the main flow right now. All this northwesterly wind is going to kind of come in here and push the storm towards the south and east. So similar to Eta, but you just don't have this gyre that ends up setting up. You actually do have a gyre, but it is much more focused over the Caribbean, or over the Eastern Pacific rather, this time. Now, after this point in time, you can see some area of vorticity try to develop here out of seemingly nothing. Now, if anything did form, this is 48 hours from now, so this is 2 days by 7 a.m. Wednesday. Again, the weak leftover vorticity associated with Iota now over El Salvador, crossing into the Eastern Pacific. Now, the main steering flow still at this time, you can see a ridge that is generally remaining out across the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, a big trough that it has dug in across the northeast United States with a trailing cold front, now kind of extending all the way in towards the northwestern Caribbean, and another ridge out here across the eastern Atlantic. So your primary steering flow right now is generally still going to be out of the west and southwest. So you're kind of getting this flow in the atmosphere at a west southwesterly direction. Because you can actually see what ends up happening here is we get this little area of vorticity to develop. Now, I caution because the GFS has been known to spin up these little eddies of vorticity into something that don't actually occur. And we'll look at the Euro here in a moment and look at that solution. But the general steering flow should still remain out of the southwest. So this is 78 hours from now, and things can and will change. But I'm not suspecting that we're going to see another major hurricane come up through, the Caribbean and enter into the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think that's going to happen. We have a fairly stout ridge, a very kind of cold ridge over portions of the Gulf of Mexico, and that is creating a lot of northwesterly flow behind it with this front now that's kind of sagging in across Central America. That's going to kind of create a lot of that northwesterly flow and force the storm generally in towards South Central America at that time. Now, after that, we also will have to watch, maybe this is beyond 5 days, but a big upper level low here. And we'll look at that here on the wind charts in just a minute. But a big upper level low here being generally blocked by a ridge out towards the west. But we also have a trough digging in across here. So that should affect the storm generally, something out like that. But again, this is, 5 days from now. We're just going to have to wait and see. But we'll take a look at the wind charts there for that and see what favorability might occur for that in a second. Now going to the European solution here, this is the European 850 millibar layer, so this is about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. Again, here is the energy associated with Hurricane Iota currently. This was as of 7 a.m. this morning. We'll jump out here until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Again, you can see a big ridge sitting out across portions of the southwest right here. So you're generally getting a southwesterly component in the wind flow, in the wind here, and that's going to dive our storm generally in across Central America and then out across into the Eastern Pacific Basin. Now, again, I want you to focus on this area right in through here for what the Euro shows. Yeah, it doesn't really show a lot. And you can see here's 72 hours here, and we'll run this back to 72 hours on the GFS forecast. There's 72 hours on the GFS, and here's 72 hours on the Euro. So both are for 12Z Thursday morning. And again, this is a stark contrast and a very stark difference than what the GFS is showing. Now, you still do get a little bit of a component here. You can definitely see some of that cyclonic curvature in the atmosphere at the 5,000 foot layer, but it is not nearly as organized as the GFS shows it to be. Again, your main steering flow, very cold, predominant ridge over portions of the northeast, generally creating a lot of west and southwesterly component of the steering components down here, so not really looking for there to be any significant really of Central America and portions of Jamaica. I don't really see this being a threat down the road there. Now, you can see what the Euro is showing here. There is this area of vorticity that does develop here and generally tries to skirt, as it's very elongated, but skirt right along the United States East Coast as you get another trailing cold front that's kind of digging in with an associated trough and maybe some leftover energy down here in the South Caribbean at this time. Now, the wind components here, again, this is the 200 millibar wind, so we're really looking high up there in the atmosphere, really there at the top of the tropopause. And what we're going to be looking for is any anticyclonic flow similar to the one we're seeing here with Hurricane Iota, where this anticyclonic flow occurs. Now, again, you can see Iota moves through, and generally there remains a fairly potent amount of upper level anticyclone right over portions of the South Caribbean. Again, you can see this upper level anticyclone is very well vented within the storm. And if we actually take a look here at the vortex average sounding for the storm environment itself, you can see that at the surface you have a lot of easterly wind here at the very surface, but then you go up with height and you have generally winds that are transitioning towards the west, and then even some winds here coming out of the south, generally speaking. But again, what this is kind of telling us is that there is relative anticyclonic flow at the top here of the atmosphere, and this is fairly conducive for another storm to develop. Now, again, just because models do not show development in this area doesn't mean it won't happen, especially knowing how the Euro and the GFS has both been this year with tropical cyclone development in this part of the world. It's not something that I can't completely rule out that we see, maybe another tropical depression or storm form in this area within the next couple of days. Now, after that point, however, again, you can see that the GFS does actually spin this up into a respectable tropical storm, 994 millibars, but it is now running into land as the southwesterly wind becomes the predominant flow. A ridge sitting over portions of the Carolinas and a trailing subtropical jet that's across here. This is going to create a lot of vertical wind shear across the northern part of the Caribbean, the northern half here. and this should effectively shut off Tropical Cyclone Genesis chances for a pretty fair amount of time. Now, after this point, though, you can see that in the very long range, we do start to get the formation of another very strong upper level anticyclone pattern over the Caribbean, this time centered really over portions of the Gulf of Honduras. Whether or not this really happens and whether or not something's there to take advantage of it, of course, we don't really know. But the bottom line is there does seem to be some inherent risk for yet another tropical storm or maybe even hurricane to form in the Caribbean within the next couple of days. But after that point, it looks like things are going to start quieting down as we get ready to round off the hurricane season. It's been a crazy 2020 hurricane season, and it's going to remain at least active for a couple more days. All right. With that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.